Hello, I'm here with Mariah Edgington. She has a very inordinary important message to deliver to all adults. This is personal, and it's about advance directives and also wills, but primarily advance directives. Can you encapsulate what is advance directive? And really, how much detail do we need to go in? I mean, I have so many questions about this.
Well, first of all, thank you, Michelle, for having me on. It's a very good honor to be here with you, and thank you for asking. And you're right, these are very important questions that we need to have answered that many people just are not familiar with until a situation occurs, and then they don't have the necessary paperwork in line because they just didn't know about it. So when we're talking about advance directives, what we're talking about is looking for someone who you have a relationship with that can speak for you if you're not able to speak for yourself in a medical emergency. And that person, we would call them a healthcare proxy. It's part of the advance directives. Many people have heard of something called a living will,
Right.
or a durable power of attorney for healthcare. And of course, people have heard about wills as well. And the medical part of it is naming a person that you trust, that you've had a conversation with, that would know what you would like, your choices in and around your care that you want to receive or care you don't want to receive in the event that you're unable to speak for yourself in a medical crisis.
Now, both of us, our background and continued background is medical, and both of us have worked in hospitals, and we know what goes on behind those doors. Now, my experience one time was with a hospital that would not take my living will or my advance directive. What happens during those times? I mean, especially, see, we don't have someone that close. How do we get around what we feel life is about, and when it's time to go, how detailed can we get and how demanding?
Those are good questions. And as with anything in life, you just do the best planning and preparation that you can do with the hopes that the people who are on the receiving end of those documents do honor them. The interesting part about advance directives that some people don't understand or have never been told about is that once you put an advance directive in place, it can be changed at any time. So it's not permanent.
By the person who wrote it.
Absolutely. That's right. And so many people I've found have stated and they feared that they were locked into what they decided right then. And that's just not true. Anyone at any time, the person who wrote it, they can make a change if they've had a change in circumstances. And we actually encourage people to revisit those advance directives. Yes. Now, we do say that people make these advance directives, and most hospitals and doctors will abide by what those decisions are. And oftentimes, they are a critical piece of the puzzle. When someone cannot talk for themselves, for example, if they end up in a car accident or in any kind of medical emergency where they have a breathing tube placed and they're intubated and they cannot speak for themselves, or they're sedated and they're not able to speak for themselves, that is the critical point of where this information comes into play. Because now within the doctors and caregivers in the hospital's hand is your wishes, because you've stated them in that directive. And at that point, that is a real asset for the people in the hospital to be able to follow your wishes.
Okay, this brings up an awful lot because I've always had a will. Advance directive was kind of a little portion of the will. And I've had a lot of friends since I was 22 die, and they didn't have anything. This is a legal document. You do
Yes,
not need to go to a lawyer to have it as a legal document.
that's correct.
Can you elaborate a little bit on maybe the legalities of this? And if, say, a hospital, or even if there was an emergency, such as you mentioned, a car accident, and I've had people that have DNR tattooed on their chest. How sometimes people are in such chaos during emergencies, they don't pay attention to this.
That's a
How
very
can,
good point. Very
oh,
good point, because we don't carry them with us. It's not on our person. Someday I would like to have it be on, just like the organ donation is on driver's license or identifications. I would like to see that happen for advance directives, so people know that you do have those indeed. But you bring up an excellent point, because we don't carry that document with us at all times, or I'm not familiar with someone who carries their advance directive around. It's only once you get to the hospital and you're already, your kin is called, they know that you have that. So looking at it that way, it's a more broad thing. One, what happens if you were in a car accident, even though you had that document, the emergency responders didn't see it, they're going to treat you as if you didn't have any document, because that's their legal responsibility. Now, when you talked about legalities and the form itself does not have to be legally done by an attorney, that's state by state. And I have a resource that I will put into your, after your
right.
resource guides.
We're going to post as much as we can.
And it does list every state. And so if you follow that link to your own state, and also if you're listening to this from a different country, you'll need to follow up with your country to see what it is that your area requires. So some of them can be as simple as you printing out a paper, filling it out. It's most places you can find this paperwork. It's very descriptive. It tells you exactly how to walk through it. And then, for instance, the most simplistic one is going to be a document that you have just witnessed by someone who is not you or the person that you're making for that, your choice for your healthcare proxy. So a third-party witness, basically. And then the next type would be something that you could do the same, make that within you and your proxy would sign it in front of a notary. And those are commonly done in the hospital. So if someone came into the hospital and we were talking to them as Joint Commission requires, everyone be asked, do you have an advance directive? If they said no, then we would call the social worker if they wanted to talk about this. And in that situation, then in the hospital, you wouldn't have an attorney sign it, but you would actually have a notary sign it. Or you'd get the information and you'd be able to take it to your attorney if your state required that. And then, of course, the third thing is with an attorney filling it out and completing the whole document, which can be costly, but I have found a way that it is not costly and it's very effective to be able to get both advance directive paperwork done and a will for a very reasonable cost. And I think that is a beneficial thing for many people, because if you don't have them, you may not get your wishes known by people, and that includes a will too.
I do want to bring up a couple of things, because this is such a serious subject and it affects everybody on their last moments, because this is the only guarantee you have in life. You are going to die. It is a guarantee, know that. In my car, I have DNR all over the place. But if I were in a really bad accident, no one would see that. So, and also there's this thing called ICE, in case of emergency. And a lot of older people that I know in their 80s and 90s, they have this little slip on their front door, and the slip inside, it's in plastic and slip inside, stating where inside the house that advance directive and will is. Also, I have that in my car, where that will is carried and advance directive is carried in my car. But if we have a really critical emergency, there are times I put right on my wrist, DNR. because I do not want to go to a hospital. I do not want to die in a hospital. I would rather die on the asphalt than in a hospital. I've worked in them. You know what I'm saying.
And to be clear, because there might be people who are not medical listening, when Michelle's refers to a DNR in the hospital, that's medical leaves for do not resuscitate.
Mm-hmm.
And another way to look at that term, we can use a different acronym, and that is dignity and respect. So we know that people can make choices, and for me, my choice is very clear. My healthcare proxy knows what I do want and what I don't want. And so because of that, it makes it more simplistic if I were to go to the hospital and then they did request that healthcare proxy. But it's like Michelle says, if you're in an accident, what's going to happen? And we do know that what is going to happen if the first responders or paramedics do not see that, do not resuscitate, or do not do certain things that you would have as a healthcare proxy knows, then they're going to do everything they can to save you.
Well, as I stated a few moments ago, I know people in their 80s and 90s, they literally have tattooed DNR.
Yeah, actually many nurses do too. Many critical care nurses have that as well. Yeah. But you have to get to that chest first to see how their chest.
Well, quite often that chest is going to be exposed because they're going to want to work on the heart or do some type of resuscitation. There's so many issues around this, and I think it's very important in your Advance Directive, and this is something you brought up before when we spoke, what you do not want.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's very important. And there are some other more formal and more extensive parts of Advance Directives that people who have a known condition, for example, if you had a terminal condition and you knew that your life had a certain amount of time that was unlikely you'd live beyond that, there are some more advanced instructions where you can say, yes, I'll be resuscitated if I can do X, Y, Z, but not from here over. And then you get into doctor's orders. So those can be done as well. But the best thing for us to do is just to inform the public that this is out there and that we would like to see them have an Advance Directive, make a plan, speak to people. And that's a difficult thing. People are uncomfortable with what you led in with on this conversation, that they're going to die. And we're just not good with talking about it anymore.
And that's a shame, because this is a fact.
Yeah.
It is a fact. It is the only guarantee in life. Once you're born, you're going to die at some point. And what age category are we responsible as an adult? Does it start to have an Advance Directive?
Yeah, it does. It starts at age 18. And so anyone over the age of 18, it would be recommended to not only have an Advance Directive, but have had conversations with people that they're around all the time so they know they have that Advance Directive. Anyone who's under 18 is still considered a minor, and then their parent is the one who gets that, or their guardian.
Hopefully their parents do something right. Hopefully the parents do have a will and an Advance Directive. Yes. And these are two different parts. Can you give us just a little bit how these are two different parts, the will and the advance?
Of course, a will is something that is a firmly legal document that needs to be made through an attorney. And those documents are more for property. That's the kind of the basic division where you can think, okay, is this about my property or is this about my person? And so when you're looking at your person with healthcare issues, then that's when you get into the Advance Directive for medical, or durable power of attorney for medical. And so those are the ones we're looking at to go to the hospital with, or or to make sure that people do have that. I think also I will send you a link so that you can put that on there too, of a couple really good TED Talks. Those are kind of
Yes,
a talk
yes.
that is
Ooh,
very
we're going to go into
easy to
that
listen
one.
to. Yeah, they're very educational, very informative, and they help a whole lot. The Conversation Project is the one of the best resources that I've ever found that speaks regular non-medicalese.
Uh-huh.
And I find myself, even as much as I talk about this and as many people as I do, still I have a tendency to default back to that medicalese because
Right,
that's where I have been for years.
right.
And so the Conversation Project really breaks it down into very layman's terms.
I do want to add on this is that for a notary, and especially people that do not have very much money, you can go to your bank and have notarized your will and your advance directive notarized. You can also download from the web different areas, I mean, different formats for, or templates, as you will, for a will.
Yes.
I have not seen that for Advance Directive, but I think we're going to be putting that up also.
Yes.
Now,
Mhm.
I love TED Talks.
Yeah.
And this is something else about our Advance Directive is where do we want to be placed when we want to die? Now, for me, I do not like chemicals. I am a vegetarian. I drink a lot of carrot juice. A lot of people have always teased me why I have red hair is because of all the carrot juice. And I am extremely healthy, but I do not want to be cremated because they do load you up with chemicals.
Yeah.
When you put into a coffin, it's all chemicals. I do not want to kill the earth anymore. So there's other areas that we can choose to be
Right.
placed for death. Mine is I want to go back to the earth and be food for the flora and fauna that has kept me alive as a lifelong vegetarian and let the earth and animals consume my body. Now, that could be a little grueling for some people, but I have ashes from my horses and ashes from my dogs, and that's spread around too. And I want it to be a happy occasion because this was a life well lived.
Yeah.
But on TED Talks, I think you may have watched some of them with the wood
Mhm.
chips or other areas that we can choose besides just cemeteries.
Yes. And one of the good, interesting TED Talks that we'll also include in this is about the mushroom suit. It's organic, where you become part of the earth and do exactly what you're talking about, Michelle Ace. And so we're moving to that area. I did notice recently, because I do receive information about that, the holistic and the organic type of burials. And now there is one in the ocean as well. And it's totally without chemicals. I don't know where that was. I'll have to look that up. But there are a lot of progressive things, and people just need to check with cemeteries if they want to go to a cemetery. They can actually, if they have their own land, there are a lot of resources. It's something that you have to look for yourself, because not very many funeral homes or cemeteries would like you being out there getting your own plot somewhere, because that takes down on their financial end. So there's a lot of options out there
There are a lot of
around death and
options.
die.
And
Yeah.
I'm going to include some of the TED Talk links. Um, for my horses here in Colorado, there's a man who bought a huge portion of land where the horses go back to nature
Oh, nice.
naturally. They, the land, the birds, the coyotes, we have wolves, uh, foxes, all different creatures. They feed on the horse and then they go back to they feed back to the earth.
Right.
And this is a wonderful way because we don't need to bury, and we know there's a celebration.
Yeah.
Um, There's so many options available to us. We forget to put them in our will. People forget to pass the animals along. Can you speak on this?
I actually can say that before our conversation, I hadn't given that consideration just because I was so focused on people. I did, however, know that many times animals will perish after their owners have passed. So I have learned quite a lot from you because this is something that I was not in tune to. So I'm learning as we go here, and I think you are on the right track to try to see if we can find help and resources in and around the animals.
Well, a lot of times they're family members or a friend. I have a very good friend who's taking everything over for me. And also any my furnishings or whatever, everything's going to her. And then I've delegated certain friends get certain things of their wishes, but the animals are delegated to her, and that she is taught, familiarized with my training methods and how they sleep, their food, everything. So this way, there's no chance of that animal just being taken and euthanized. Yesterday, I adopted another dog, and it took me a little bit. As many people knew, last year I adopted my beloved Rottweiler, and he died in less than 4 months after I had him, and I was shattered. And while I was waiting to adopt, there was a man in a truck with just a sweetheart of a dog. I asked if I could give treats, and he said yes. And then he pulled his truck back, and I thought that was very interesting behavior. What happened was he had to relinquish his dog. And when he walked out of that buddy center, his face was gray. He was hunched over. He was about 6'2". I could see his mourning. And luckily, we are just now starting to open up our adoption centers. I want you to know all the animals that have been relinquished during this time, a high percentage in the 90s have been euthanized because in the United States, for the 8 states that were open, but the rest of the states, 42 states, no humane societies were open. Animals were euthanized. And it's critical that we understand what happens, even though we try to send them to rescues, but sometimes even rescues do not work. And they are pretty expensive because they are nonprofit organizations and they need the donations. And when you do buy a pet, sometimes they don't have a background and you are paying several hundred to thousands of dollars for a rescued animal, depending on the animal. So it is important that we understand the gravity of our human life and how we've touched our world through animals and how precious they are, our children, and also our friends. And the last thing I would like to talk about, and it's something we've mentioned before, is not all deaths need to be mournful. It's a celebration of a person's life.
Right. Very true.
Go with it.
Yeah, it's very true. And I feel your empathy so much. You're just such a compassionate and empathetic person. I'm so thrilled to be here with you. It's just the interesting thing about and through our conversation is because I speak to many people about advanced directives, and had we not had this conversation, had we not been in conversation, I would not have known this gem to take now out and say to people. Not only is it important for you to create an advanced directive about yourself in the event that you do die, have that person who is your healthcare proxy or other person know and have met your animal, have met your, because animals own such a big part of our hearts. And because of our conversation, that's how things change. And it's amazing to me to know that what you shared with me here, what people will hear outside of here because of this, it's a ripple in the pond. And you have changed many, many lives because of it. Once somebody hears that their animal has consequences if they die, that changes how they feel about creating an advance directive. It changes how they see that need. It becomes more of a need. It's not just about them. They have to consider what is going to happen with their beloved pet afterwards. Who is going to care for it? Who would they trust with their pet? And so I cannot thank you enough for this. This is amazing to have this information.
Well, some people have human family. I have animal family.
Yeah. Oh my goodness. And how important that is. Truly, truly important.
One thing, I'm sorry.
I just appreciate you so much.
Oh, thank you. Well, it is very mutual, Mariah. I'm glad somehow we came across each other. One thing we did not talk about is hospice. And that is a choice also before death instead of hospitals.
True. And hospice is getting painted. It years ago notoriously was painted with a bad brush and a wide brush that was just, oh, you went to hospice, you were going to die. The thing about hospice is that it is a place that people can go physically, or hospice is a group of people that come to you, and it's within the last 6 months of your life. However, most people don't take advantage of it. And oh my goodness, the people in hospice are the most warm, empathetic, caring people with the most compassion to help your family and you be guided through the end of life stages. And I highly encourage people to look into hospice. Now, let's say, for instance, you actually got better instead of worse. Your terminal condition was not terminal anymore. Well, then you just transition out of hospice. Or if you were living longer than the 6 months, then the doctor just writes another order, and hospice is paid for by usually, well, not usually, it is paid for by the Medicare and Medicaid and those programs. They support that because they know how much value is in it.
Well, we've covered a lot of very serious territory, and something we all do need to think about. And I hope people start just scribbling down what you want, and then throw it up on your computer, throw it up on your friend's computer, or somewhere. Write it with via your hand, and go to your bank. UPS, they notarize. FedEx notarizes. There's so many places where you can go for a notary. Maybe we can end this on a happy note because you mentioned it in the beginning, unless you have something more to say, Mariah.
I think we've covered quite a bit of ground. You're right.
Well, as you see, snow.
Oh, that's so beautiful.
Yes, I do a lot of my own photography, and this is my neighborhood, and we have snow. The thing about Colorado is we also have sun plow, and the next day or in 2 days it'll all be melted. And our Colorado feeds 5 states. The Colorado River has to go down, and we need all this snow from the mountains and the cities to go down and feed 5 states on ag, sheep, goat, growing food. So yay, all this snow. It's so beautiful. And yes, I took this picture just this other day. I took several pictures. I wanted to show this beautiful snow, and it's already gone.
It's so beautiful.
Melted. So that is part of our nature, is that come the seasons of our lives, just like
Right.
weather.
That
A
is exactly
season,
true.
a season will melt. Then Colorado comes after the springtime snow comes into an emerald green, and everything starts popping up. We already have crocuses popping up, and so this is a life season. Thank you, Mariah, for
And thank you,
joining us.
Michelle. Thank you.
Please,
Journey well.
thank you. Please connect with Mariah, and I will have as much detail as possible for links linked on LinkedIn. We also send this to YouTube and Facebook, so you have your choices when you want to watch in segments or in full video. Thank you very much for joining Women in Business Thrive. Mariah, thank you.